The sun was setting over Ouagadougou. A red glow bathed the sky like a warning from above. Inside the quiet of his office, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stared at the screen in front of him, jaw clenched, fists tight. A news flash had just dropped. An official communiqué from ELECAM, Cameroon's electoral body, announced that the upcoming presidential elections would be conducted under the direct supervision of the United Nations. The words echoed in his mind like cannon fire. Cooperation agreement with the UN Department of Political and Peace-Building Affairs. Traoré couldn't believe his eyes. Once again, Africa had bowed, not before its people, but before its old masters. He stood up abruptly, nearly toppling his chair. The room was silent, but within him, a storm raged. They dared, he muttered through clenched teeth. They dared hand over their sovereignty. He grabbed his red beret from the corner of the table, placed it firmly on his head, and called for his aide-de-camp. Assemble the Security Council, now, not tomorrow, not in an hour, now. The young officer obeyed without question. Since Traoré had taken power, everyone knew that tone meant history was about to be made. As the footsteps echoed down the hall, Traoré walked to the window. Outside, the city carried on, unaware of the diplomatic earthquake that had just occurred. "Paul Biya," he whispered, "you've learned nothing from history." In the chamber of the National Council for the Safeguard of the Homeland, generals, strategists, and key advisors had gathered. Silence reigned. Whenever the captain called an emergency meeting, it was never symbolic. Ibrahim Traoré entered slowly, calmly, but his eyes told another story. There was a cold, controlled fury in them, one reserved for those who only speak when it matters and speak with impact. He laid a printed communiqué from ELECAM on the table. For several seconds, he said nothing. He let each man read. Then he stood tall and spoke. "Comrades, Africa has just received another slap in the face, but this time, it didn't come from a colonizer. It came from one of our own." He paused, arms crossed behind his back, then raised his voice. "Cameroon, land of heroic resistance against imperialism, has just handed its elections to the UN. Yes, you read right. Paul Biya has decided that his people's fate will now be certified in New York, not Yaoundé." A murmur of outrage rose in the room. The defense minister slammed a fist on the table. "That old man is selling his nation." But Traoré raised his hand. Silence returned. "No, comrades, this isn't a sale. It's worse. It's surrender, symbolic surrender, no guns, no tanks, just signatures. And it's with pens like these that they kill us." The words fell like hammers. The tension grew. This is not just Cameroon's problem. It's a red alert for the whole of Africa, because if the UN can manage our elections today, tomorrow it will impose its laws, its men, and its armies. He turned to the whiteboard and wrote 3 letters in red. SOS. Sovereignty, self-respect, awakening. These are the 3 words we must revive. After the meeting, Ibrahim Traoré returned to his office. He knew this moment called not just for anger, but action. Africa could no longer be a spectator. It had to rise, speak in one voice, and strike decisively. He sat before the camera. No luxury backdrop, no flag behind him. Just him, his uniform, and the truth. He pressed the red button. Recording. "People of Africa, what I am about to say is not a threat. It is an alarm." His voice was steady, but charged with fire. "Today, Cameroon has agreed to let the United Nations organize its elections. Some will say it's for peace. But I tell you, this is the beginning of a new colonialism, disguised, sophisticated, and far more dangerous than the last." He leaned toward the lens. "This new colonialism doesn't arrive with chains. It arrives with NGOs. It doesn't strike with cannons. It strikes with institutions. It doesn't kill on the battlefield. It puts us to sleep with conferences, resolutions, and agreements." He stood back. "Paul Biya has betrayed his people, and in doing so, he has opened a breach others may enter. Today, it's Cameroon. Tomorrow, who? Togo? Senegal? The DRC?" A long, intense pause. "We will not accept this. Africa will not become an administrative colony managed from the West." He stopped recording. The video was shared everywhere. Social media, regional channels, translated into multiple languages. This wasn't just a speech, it was a battle cry. Traoré's video hit like an explosion. Within 24 hours, it had over 10 million views across Francophone Africa. On WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook, it spread like a spark on dry savanna. Reactions were swift. In Dakar, students took to the streets holding signs: Africa for Africans, no to foreign trusteeship. In Bamako, Colonel Goïta sent Traoré a message: "Brother, you said what many only dare whisper. You are not alone." In Niamey, General Tiani called for an emergency summit of Sahelian countries. "We must respond together. The hour is grave." But in Yaoundé, the tremors were strongest. Inside the presidential palace, Biya was silent. His advisors scrambled to calm the storm, calling the UN agreement cooperation, transparency, democratic safeguards. But the people weren't fooled. "Why the UN?" a protester in Douala shouted. "We have our own judges, our own observers. Where is our sovereignty?" Social media erupted. Hashtags like Biya betrayed, UN out, and Free Africans dominated the feeds. When one of Biya's officials tried to discredit Traoré on TV, calling him a reckless young man playing revolutionary, the public backlash was immediate. The more they attacked Traoré, the more Africa united behind him. That night, Traoré received a call from a deep, solemn voice. "I stand with you. What you've begun is bigger than you, but you must finish it." It was a voice from the Congo, a voice of battle. Traoré closed his eyes. He knew now. This was no longer a debate. It was an uprising of consciousness. 2 days later, in the great amphitheater of Joseph Kizerbo University, an extraordinary event was held, a Pan-African conference on sovereignty. Intellectuals, soldiers, students, traditional leaders, and artists came from Mali, Niger, Guinea, and the Central African Republic, all answering the call. At the center of the stage stood Ibrahim Traoré, in uniform, angry, on a mission, no prepared speech. He spoke from the heart. "I'm not here for diplomacy. I'm here to awaken. We stand at a crossroads. Either we choose unity or we die in submission." Thunderous applause erupted, but Traoré raised his hand. This wasn't about praise. "The UN does not come to help. It comes to decide. And every decision made without us is a bullet in the heart of our freedom." He gestured to a map of Africa projected behind him. "Look at this map. Vast lands, countless resources. Yet here we are, still begging for elections, as if we can't organize ourselves." The crowd was breathless. "This is not a Cameroonian crisis. It is a continental one. If one of us falls under foreign control, we all do." He held up a worn copy of the OAU Charter. "They taught us unity. They dreamed us free. What did we do with that dream? Debts, compromises, supervised elections." Then, with thunder in his voice, "To every head of state still standing, still patriotic, I say this: it is time to say no. No to UN interference. No to outsourced democracy. No to the fear of being free." The conference echoed across the continent. Students formed sovereign watch groups. Bloggers and radio hosts repeated his words. A seed had been planted. Africa no longer needed observers. It needed guardians. In Yaoundé, behind the high walls of the Etudi Palace, the atmosphere was glacial. Paul Biya, weakened but still clinging to power, sat silently in a crisis meeting. His ministers were tense. For the first time, criticism was coming from within. "Excellency, we're losing control of public opinion," said the Minister of Territorial Administration. "The streets are boiling, the army is wavering, and Traoré's video, it's even circulating in our barracks." Biya said nothing. He stared at a map of Cameroon on the table. His hands trembled, but he refused to retreat, not to a young captain from Burkina Faso. "You don't understand," he finally murmured. "The UN is a shield. Without it, we're alone. I can't risk chaos," the Prime Minister snapped back. "But chaos is already here, and that shield you speak of, it's a straitjacket." Meanwhile, outside, the city seethed. Protesters held signs: "Cameroonian elections for Cameroonians. UN Diar occupation. Biya must go." The slogans were no longer subtle. Anger surged. That night, a video appeared online. Masked officers from the Cameroonian military called for the cancellation of UN supervision. They weren't staging a coup. They were demanding sovereignty. In Ouagadougou, the news reached Traoré. He didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He simply placed his hand on the table. "It's begun," he said. "The fire has left the fuse. It's now in their veins." In New York, Geneva, Paris, and Brussels, foreign ministries were in panic. Traoré's message wasn't fading. It was growing, replicating, feared. At the UN, a European diplomat put it plainly, "This captain is igniting an ideological wildfire. If we don't stop him, we'll have Traorés popping up everywhere." Retaliation began. Targeted sanctions, partial aid freezes, suspended military partnerships. Official statements labeled Traoré a threat to regional stability. In Ouagadougou, Traoré didn't flinch. He held a press conference. No protocol, no pageantry. "They want to silence me? Let them try. But understand this. I don't speak for myself. I speak for those who refuse to lower their eyes any longer." He held up a folder. These are the contracts between our governments and foreign powers, the secret agreements, the exploitation, the truth they fear. He published them all. Names, terms, hidden clauses, an earthquake. Meanwhile, in Conakry, Bobo-Dioulasso, and Bangui, people chanted his name, not as a savior, but as a signal. Traoré was no longer a president, he was a symbol. But Western intelligence services activated covert networks. A drone of unknown origin was shot down over a Burkinabe military zone. Traoré inspected the wreckage. "They're testing our sleep," he said coldly. "Let them know, we don't sleep anymore." In the quiet town of Koudougou, west of Burkina Faso, a discreet building hosted a historic meeting. 7 African heads of state or their envoys sat at a round table. No hierarchy, no foreign press. Mali, Guinea, Niger, Chad, Central African Republic, Congo, and Burkina Faso. This was not a secret coup, it was the birthplace of a doctrine. Traoré presented his proposal, the Koudougou Pact, a charter of African sovereignty. 3 pillars: refusal of all foreign electoral supervision, creation of an independent Pan-African electoral observatory, automatic solidarity among signatories facing sanctions or interference. Some doubted. "What if they cut our funding?" asked a Congolese minister. "Then we'll create our own," said a Nigerian economist. "This time, for us, by us." By dawn, 5 of the 7 signed. 2 asked for time. Traoré declared, "This is not a military alliance. This is a moral one, a vow before our peoples." The pact spread like wildfire. Schools debated it. Elders endorsed it. Radio stations read it out loud. A Beninese journalist wrote, "Koudougou has become what Berlin never was, a place where Africa decides for itself." Meanwhile, in Paris, Washington, and Berlin, pressure mounted. The word encirclement was whispered in corridors. In his office, Traoré received a handwritten letter from Cameroon, not a soldier, not a minister, an old Bamileke elder. "Captain, you've rekindled a flame we've protected for decades. Don't let the wind blow it out." Traoré held it close. He knew there was no going back. In Yaoundé, the tension was unbearable. Since the signing of the Koudougou Pact, the people's faith in the Biya regime had collapsed. The masses were no longer just protesters. They had become a tidal wave. Day after day, graffiti appeared across neighborhoods. "Nation first. No to foreign elections?" Traoré spoke the truth. Even once obedient local media began using veiled language. Popular radio hosts spoke of national suffocation, of the moral bankruptcy of the regime. Behind the palace walls, the cracks were now visible in the army. Several senior officers refused to mobilize troops against demonstrators. One lieutenant colonel declared, "We swore allegiance to the people, not to orders dictated from Geneva." Paul Biya, more isolated than ever, called a nighttime meeting with his inner circle. He trembled as he sat. His eyes, tired and distant, searched for a way out of the trap he had helped build. "They want my downfall," he whispered. "They want their country back," replied a voice from the shadows, "and they will get it." Meanwhile, at a military base near Marawa, a young Cameroonian captain addressed his soldiers. "We are not against the Republic. We are against submission, and if we must choose between a president and a homeland, we choose the homeland." Traoré's words had spread, not like a virus, but like a vaccine. Back in Ouagadougou, Traoré watched the developments with calm intensity. To his team, he repeated, "We must not intervene militarily. This is not our war to fight, but it is our cause." He sent a message to the Cameroonian people, broadcast across Africa. "Rise, Cameroon. This struggle is not just for today, not just for a ballot box. It's for 100 years. It's for your children and the ones yet to be born." On the night of March 28th, a rumor flooded Douala. Ministers were fleeing the country. By morning, social media froze. A viral communique appeared. We, free officers of the Defense Forces, announced the suspension of the foreign-supervised electoral process. The people of Cameroon will reclaim their destiny. It wasn't a coup, it was the return of sovereignty. At dawn on March 29th, Cameroon awoke in an eerie calm. No sirens, no gunfire, no chaos, just silence, a powerful, resonant silence. In Yaoundé, soldiers no longer pointed their rifles. They greeted civilians. Elders wept quietly. Youth roared with joy. Paul Biya had been evacuated in the night. No bloodshed, no force, just the will of a people who said, enough. In Ouagadougou, Traoré received the news in his office. He didn't smile, he didn't cheer. He simply looked up at the sky and whispered, Africa breathes. Then he stepped into the courtyard, alone. He stared at the African flags surrounding the revolutionary memorial. This is not a victory, he said aloud. It's a beginning. In the days that followed, 14 African nations signed the Ouagadougou Pact. The Pan-African Electoral Observatory was officially launched, staffed not by foreign NGOs, but by judges, elders, scholars, and citizens. Several countries announced plans to exit all externally supervised electoral frameworks. At the UN, silence followed the panic. Security Council members were divided. Some whispered, maybe. It was simply the end of the illusion. Traoré refused medals, he declined titles. He didn't want to be seen as a liberator, only as a watchman, a witness, a signal of an awakened Africa. A South African journalist once asked him, Captain, what will history say about you? He answered instantly, it will say nothing. It's up to the people to write the rest. What I started only matters if others finish it. Years later, in a small northern Cameroonian village, a teacher told this story to his students. He showed them a black and white photo of Ibrahim Traoré. Do you see this man? He never set foot here, but because of him, you vote freely today with no foreign monitors. A child raised his hand. Sir, can we become like him? The teacher smiled. You don't need to become like him, just become free. He already cleared the path. End of the story, a tribute to African sovereignty, a fictional account drawn from truths too long silenced.